Thank you so much for joining us for this recorded conversation with Food Recovery Network and the National Association of Realtors. I am so thrilled to have this conversation and dig in together as part of our series called Intersectionalities in Practice, brought to you by Food Recovery Network and today in partnership with National Association of Realtors, an organization that we love dearly. We've been in deep partnership with National Association of Realtors, NAR for short, for several years now, and I'm really excited to dig into all of that. My name is Regina Anderson. I'm the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network, and today I'm actually recording from New York City. And so I just wanted to first say I am here. I was doing a little bit of research on the land in which I am having this conversation, and it is the land of the Lenape, Lenape. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, because a lot of times these amazing names of our ancestors, they don't have an auditory way to pronounce the name. So if I'm mispronouncing that, I do apologize. But I wanted to honor and recognize that is the land in which I am currently inhabiting today. And I also wanted to say our Intersectionalities in Practice is a new name for an ongoing conversation that we've been having here at Food Recovery Network, where for us, food is at the center and equality is at the center. And we know from there, so many different topics intersect with that. And today we are really going to dig into another right that we all have, which is housing. And so I'm really excited to think about how housing and food intersect. And we have two amazing guests with us today that are going to help us to unpack some of those things, where we can be curious, all of us together, as we dig into the conversation. So thank you all. And I also wanted to mention, within Intersectionalities in Practice, I mentioned food and equality is at the center. And for that, with Food Recovery Network, we have our FRN 10X framework that we talk about and how equity is at the center of that. We went out into our community, our shared community, around our students, our alums, our dining providers, the wonderful organizations that donate food, our partner agencies, the incredible nonprofits that are on the front lines, ensuring that our neighbors have the food that they deserve, and other people that are funders, other stakeholders that ensure that this movement is thriving. And within that, we talked a lot about how there's a lot of social and racial conversations that are happening, and how are we keeping those understandings at the forefront of how we do our work. Who are the communities that are suffering? Why are they suffering? And ensuring that we are honoring that in how we do our work. So equity, food, and today, housing. So I'm excited to turn things over to Elaine. Elaine, if you don't mind, I would love for you to introduce our two amazing guests today.
Absolutely, thank you. So today we are joined by Bob Goldberg and Dr. Jessica Lautz. Bob Goldberg is Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of Realtors. During his tenure, he has focused on transforming the organization and leading efforts to put members first, while driving the technology innovation and collaboration needed to position the real estate industry for the future. Working with the association's volunteer leadership, he has specifically emphasized the importance of staying ahead of real estate and property-focused technology. Under his leadership, NAR launched the Strategic Business Innovation and Technology Group, designed to drive industry innovation and benefits to NAR members. This group includes an emerging technology team tasked with finding partnerships with organizations, companies, and institutions researching and developing new technologies. The team also launched the successful Innovation and Opportunity Investment Summit, a unique yearly gathering of real estate practitioners, technology innovators, and investors to identify opportunities to work together. And we are also joined by Dr. Jessica Lautz, who is Vice President of Demographics and Behavioral Insights at the National Association of Realtors. The core of her research focuses on analyzing trends for both NAR members and housing consumers. Through management of surveys, focus groups, and data analysis, she presents new and innovative ways to showcase results. Jessica discusses research findings in major media outlets and international presentations, In 2021, she was named one of Housing Wire's Women of Influence, a list representing 100 of the most influential women in leadership in the housing industry. She also volunteers at Nottingham-Trent University as an industry fellow, mentoring real estate graduate students. Jessica received her doctorate of real estate from Nottingham-Trent University in the United Kingdom. She also holds a master's in public policy from American University and undergraduate degrees in political science and law and justice from Central Washington University. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Elaine. And so for all of you joining us, I also wanted to really thank Elaine for helping us all come together today. There's a lot of behind the scenes work that goes into putting on a conversation like this. And so Elaine actually is our program associate here at Food Recovery Network, as you all know, but just wanted to honor and recognize Elaine, and also honor and recognize Elaine's history as an alum. So Elaine, worked as a volunteer at her Food Recovery Network chapter. So really excited that we can all be here together. And I wanted to start off the conversation with Bob. Again, this is a recorded conversation. We're going to have so many resources for everyone who's listening in. But what brought us all here together, our deep partnership, as I was mentioning, with National Association of Realtors, Food Recovery Network has been, years. It's been years. And, so we wanted to hear from Bob. There was this publication, some research, and I know we're going to dig into that research and make sure that everyone has that available, around the connection between housing insecurity and food insecurity. And Bob, I was just wondering if you could tell us, why you felt like this kind of research was so important to National Association of Realtors that you wanted to make sure that this research came through.
Sure, and thank you very much. We are such devoted partners, as you mentioned, to Food Recovery Network and what it represents and what it stands for. And I too, like all of you, are very excited that Dr. Lautz has joined us. She is truly a rock star in our organization, and will certainly shed a lot of light and data that will support a lot of what we're talking about here today. But it's really more of a belief that being a leading voice, and we have a lot of partners in the housing sector that are very vocal and need to be vocal about the importance of housing and shelter in this country. It's not, it's not a luxury. It's a basic right of life that you've got to have shelter, whether you're owning it or renting it. That we have to do all the right things to help support that cause. And we felt like there needed to be a deeper dive, as we always do. We've got a very extensive research area within our organization, but wanted to understand what are other factors that impact, that inhibit, that help influence opportunity in housing for Americans. What are the things that really have that influence? So doing a deep dive, and then through that research that we'll get more into, and seeing how, guess what? The issues with food and hunger and insecurity in that area very much dovetails in the things that we're finding in the same areas of housing. And so, undertaking this opportunity to do a deep dive report for us to learn what's there, but more importantly, while we have a lot of great data that we're going to share today and discuss, it's really far more than about just knowing the data. It's really, how do we make actionable plans to address and deal with the problems? Because we've got to find a way to get ahead of the issues instead of always being reactive and behind the issues that affect housing in this country, food insecurity in this country, and other factors that all come to play in the basic needs and rights that we have in our life.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Bob. And you were really touching on it, the responsibility of being a leading voice, and why this research came out. And for me, as the executive director of Food Recovery Network, food is a right. I believe that so deeply. And housing has always been so important to me. And I really see why these things really connect. And, just so thankful for NAR for putting this research together. And for all of you who are listening in, we will absolutely, again, make sure that you have access to this report. It is so helpful to hear, to see, to understand, to begin to get curious when we think about our own neighborhoods, when we think about our own county, when we think about our own state, then we think about the nation. So Dr. Lautz, would you mind telling us a little bit more about your role at NAR when we think again about this, how we present ourselves as a leading voice, what your role means for NAR to walk that walk and talk that talk. And then could you walk us through a little bit more of the report? So for those of us listening in who might not have read it just yet, or maybe have it opened up as we're listening, some of the things that struck you that you could share with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's really, truly a pleasure to be here and to be in such amazing company with you, Regina and Bob. Thank you. So this is the first time that we've taken a look at this particular topic. I will say that NAR has been looking at housing affordability for a number of years as we've watched housing costs increasingly go up, as we really have not had enough building, especially for people who need affordable housing in the US, and not just for purchasing, but affordable rental properties as well. So part of my role is just looking at the housing market and looking at the changing demographics and how this is really impacting consumers on a daily basis in their lives. I was excited to dive into this report. I have to tell you, on a personal basis, when I first met you, Regina, I was just so overwhelmed by the energy and the effort that you put into this topic. But from a personal level, my family had to use the food bank as a kid. I grew up with a single mom, and we did not have secure housing. We certainly did not have secure food as well. So this became truly a passion project to dive into this topic. But looking at this, what we can see is that it really is intertwined. We know that food deserts within communities are really exist, and they exist almost on purpose as these communities were developed, that grocery stores really moved to the suburbs. They moved to where higher and moderate income families would be able to access food. And so that became a very big problem. But we also know that, looking at the academic research that's out there, that for those who are facing food insecurity, that 62% of them have a higher chance of having housing instability as well. Because at the bottom of the line, for people's budgets, you really have to come up with funding for everything within that home, keeping the lights on, making sure you have running water, but then also, is your fridge full for folks who are living there? And all of that becomes intertwined as well. In this report, what we wanted to do is really take the census pulse data that they've actually been collecting every other week during the pandemic. It's really an incredible source of information. And they actually break it down on a state level, which becomes a very useful tool for people, for practitioners, for anyone who's advocating, to be able to see what's going on in local communities. And taking this data a couple of months ago, we were able to see that 8 million households didn't have enough food to eat, about 1 in 10, and that was in July. What we looked at with this data is breaking this out by owners versus renters. And what we found is, of those 8 million, 3 million were actually homeowners. So that's perhaps contrary to common belief that if you're a homeowner, you have stable income and you're doing absolutely fine. But we know during the pandemic, it really did exacerbate so many families' ability to really make ends meet and have a stable income. And even if you worked in your dentist's office, you had hours cut, or a massage parlor, you didn't have full employment during those times. And so people really did have their hours cut, and they really couldn't bring that money together. This is harder hit, though, for renters. There are 5 million renters were actually in this position as well. And many of these families do rely on SNAP benefits and government benefits, but they also rely on food pantries to really just make their ends meet as well. And looking at the latest data, so Census is doing this every couple of weeks, I was able to dig into it, and we still see that even today, 9% of households don't have enough food to eat. What's really disturbing when we dig into the data, though, is for households that have children who are under the age of 18, half are actually relying on outside sources of food assistance to be able to make ends meet when they look at food security. And I think that becomes even more disturbing when we dig into this on a state level. And we actually see, for some states, it actually rises to 3 in 5 families. with kids under the age of 18. We really do not have enough food to eat in the last 7 days. And unfortunately, right now we know with supply issues and with worker shortages and inflation pressure that families are facing increased food costs, but they're also facing increased housing costs. So it's not getting any better, unfortunately, today. Just today, we released existing home sales data that showed that home prices have increased 13% year over year. And in 45 states, home prices are rising faster than income. And we see that for 42 states, that a 2-bedroom apartment is more expensive today and is really outpacing rental household income. And unfortunately, just to use an example of Idaho, that's one of the worst states that we pulled out in the report. A 2-bedroom apartment for rent increased 31% year over year. And so if we think about wages being cut and really families trying to scrape together what they can, and just seeing how many renters are in a situation where they have to rely on food assistance, we just know that's going to be really difficult for people at the end of the day to really make ends meet, especially when a quarter of renters are currently using SNAP benefits and 12% are getting food from pantries. So yeah, those are some highlights from the report, but I do encourage folks to dig in, especially because we do have local data in there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lautz. Thank you for walking us through that. And I also wanted to honor and recognize sharing a bit about why this is a personal pursuit for you to get this data out for folks. We can do more together when we have facts and figures and we understand what's going on in our states. And you so wonderfully crystallized that for us. And a few things that came up for me is that you were talking about the fact that when we look at our neighborhoods, and I encourage everyone, next month in November, we'll have a conversation around with this topic called community disinvestment. What is it? Why does it happen? What does that mean? And when we think about some neighborhoods, it is harder to walk, take a bus, drive, whatever it might be, locomotion, to get to a grocery store. And this isn't a place that is just selling, highly processed foods, but, actually going to a grocery store. How is it that some communities do not have these resources? Where are we putting these resources? How easy is it, if we live in a neighborhood, how easy is it for us to say, we as a community want a grocery store, and we get that grocery store? Or sometimes we as a community say we want a grocery store and we do not get a grocery store. Why does that happen sometimes? So I encourage everyone to, get curious with us today. There's going to be a lot more conversation around, what NAR has opened up for all of us to see. And then I also, you mentioned many times, SNAP benefits. And, this is a benefit for the country. It's a federal program. And last month with Emily Broadleib, who is the director of the Harvard Food Law and Policy Clinic, we talked about what SNAP is. We talked about who has access to it. But that during the pandemic, more people did rely on this benefit. It is a benefit program for all of us. And that was encouraging to her, that it did the job it was supposed to do when people needed it. It was there. But really, Dr. Lautz, you also hit on the fact that for many people, that might not make us all whole. For many people, we do have to rely on food banks, shelters, things like this, so we can get the food that we need, especially during the summer, for younger people who are not necessarily in school. Where are they going to get that meal for the day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks in between? So Emily, during this conversation, talks a lot about what that looks like from the federal policy perspective, but also the state policy perspective, and how we can all be involved. So this is all about being involved, being curious, and understanding for ourselves that, we might touch on a topic that we didn't know about. Maybe we knew about it a little bit, and we're learning more. So we wanted to just say thank you for that. And we want to really underscore what the issues are so we can think about solutions. And Bob, I wanted to ask you, right before we hit record on this conversation, you were telling us a little bit about what your day was like yesterday. Again, this leadership role with NAR. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were doing yesterday?
Sure. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity. As we as a nation, contemplate our future, and we ask our lawmakers on the Hill to take care of our country. And no matter what political side folks are, we all have, I think, commonality that we want the best thing for our country, for our communities, for our families. And one of the things that's being debated right now certainly is what is occurring with the new budget, the reconciliation bill. Now, without getting into all the technicalities, what we care about certainly as the National Association of Realtors is what is occurring with housing policy that's being debated in this bill. What's going to be funded? You hear, one side wants $3.5 trillion in this budget. The other side, people think that's way too costly. It should be lesser amounts. Whatever it is, and we're not taking a position on the pros and cons of any political party's view, we think that housing has got to be addressed because, as we said, this intersection between housing and food insecurity, et cetera, all are tied together. So I had an opportunity yesterday with my compatriots at other associations. I'll read them off because they're very impressive groups. The National Housing Conference, Habitat for Humanity, the Mortgage Bankers Association, the National Association of Hispanic Real Estate Professionals, the National Association of Home Builders, the National Fair Housing Alliance, the National Low Income Housing Coalition, along with the National Association of Realtors, that's us. NAR is the largest trade association in the world. We're one of the most powerful political action committees on the Hill, representing the voice of consumers with housing issues, rental issues, shelter issues, investment issues. All of us want to try to achieve the American dream. So we all came together with a press conference on the Hill, sponsored by the House chairperson, the Honorable Maxine Waters, and also from the Senate side, Sherrod Brown, where we had a discussion with my fellow organizations to be able to speak at a press conference on the steps of the Capitol yesterday, to tell folks that we care so much about whatever you want to battle on this bill. Housing issues are important. Housing subsidy issues, rental assistance programs, fair housing issues, all the above cannot be wiped out by these debates. Housing is such an important part of the sector of our economy. It's about almost close to 19% of the gross domestic product, building homes and everything else that goes around, around that, apartments, buying window treatments, buying appliances. It's a big part of our economy, but more importantly, it's about building our communities. It's a gathering place for our families. It's about every one of us. It affects our lives. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a chance to have our voices heard. We were on the Hill with that. It was broadcast on different news services, but it's again a way for us to say, while you're all deliberating as to what needs to go and what needs to stay, remember the importance of housing policies to help all of us. These folks that I mentioned are from every spectrum of housing representation. From what realtors do, our members, for example. Regina, I'll give you a good example. We have 1.5 million realtors in this country, all who care very much about their communities and that their communities are successful because of the families that live there. And our members are in every zip code in this country. So we wanted to make sure that our members, who, by the way, get involved in local volunteerism almost 2/3 more than anybody else of any profession. They're involved, they're independent contractors, so they're involved in their communities. This is a very important piece to make sure that housing and what comes with it is being represented and is not forgotten when they're debating these bills on the Hill.
Incredible. Thank you so much for letting us know, all the things that you're doing. And again, for everyone, tuning in to this conversation, what Dr. Lautz was saying, what Bob is saying, it's an issue that is happening right now. And part of our powerful partnership with NAR is we will keep everyone informed, whether you are an NAR member or for us, you are somebody who is committed to ensuring people get the food that they deserve. All of us, thanks so much for this information, keeping us updated live time. I know that it's not easy. There's a lot to distill, and that was really so helpful. Another thing that we're going to do, after this conversation, to make sure that everyone has access to this, is to ensure that, NAR shared with us many solutions, resources that people can go to if they are feeling like they might need help staying in their homes, whether that is through, rental assistance, mortgage assistance. So we will make sure that we share that with everyone. And we just ask that you all share that further, because it is a prevalent issue, all across the country. I know some states are debating their eviction moratoriums. I happen to live in a neighborhood that has a fair housing structure, 775 units, families, multi-generational families, and a lot of people are facing eviction. And it's a scary moment. And so, Dr. Lautz, I was just wondering, you were talking about so many of these really fascinating findings within when you were conducting the research, and shout out to your research team, an incredible group. But was there anything that you found, and I know there was like a learning moment for you as you really dug into the numbers. Was there anything that really struck you? That I know you live and breathe this every single day, but when you started to see those facts and figures come together, was there anything that you were like, I just didn't know this? And yeah.
Yeah, I think we talk a lot about housing affordability, at least at NAR, and just watching the numbers be really difficult for first-time home buyers to be able to enter the market and minority buyers to be able to enter the market. But I think that it's really when you see the numbers of people who are just having a hard time really meeting their mortgage on a daily basis and paying their electric bill and really having enough food in the last 7 days for their household, I think that's really striking. And especially when we're watching that housing affordability kind of slip further behind. Just because I think a lot of the time when we think about housing insecurity or we think about unstable housing, we often think about renters and folks on the fringe. But what does get lost is people may have been in their home for a long period of time, and it could be an aging senior who may not even be able to move from their current property because they can't find a more affordable place to live. And so I think that we do need to look at all aspects of it. And of course, I think what was perhaps the most striking to me and what is perhaps one of the most discouraging numbers is just to see the families who have children, knowing how hard parents had it and have had it in the last year and a half with the pandemic, and trying to work and really make sure that everyone stays safe as well in that household, and to see that more than half of families with kids under the age of 18 have to rely on some sort of assistance outside of their home, and watching that jump to 60% in some states. It's pretty discouraging to see those numbers at this point.
Thank you for that. I know this is really hard, this really hard numbers. And these numbers are human beings. They are our neighbors, literally our neighbors. And I know that we all know folks who are experiencing difficult times. And again, I'm so thankful for how hard our realtors work all across the country to get people into a house, to get people, whether they are first-time home buyers, whether that is, rental properties, just getting people into homes. How hard you all work, and how this pandemic, how it's affected every single person, especially when we think about, I have a lot of people in my life who are single parents and that are on the front lines, doing all kinds of different work, whether that be at the grocery store. I always shout out, if you've talked to me for like 3 seconds, you know how much I love my sister dearly. She's a single mom, she's a nurse, and she is the breadwinner, so if she got sick, like that directly affects her household. And so I know so many of us, we can just hold dear and just keep abreast of how difficult this is for so many people. And I wanted to toss out a resource for folks who might want to hear more how not only the COVID-19, how that has affected some folks here, but how we recover in that. And it's not a recovery that is the same for everyone across the country. Some of us have savings that we can rely on. Some of us have family members that we can rely on for financial assistance. But Eddie Glaude Jr. Several years ago wrote a book called Democracy in Black, and it actually talks about the financial crisis that hit 2008, 2009, and how Black communities, Black families were not able to recover at the same rate that other, that white counterparts were able to recover. Because Jessica, Dr. Lautz, if I may, you talked a lot about sometimes people have been in their homes for a very, very, very long time and have been able to weather certain storms. And the pandemic was an unforeseen, enduring time that, people maybe weren't able to stay in their homes. And so I just wanted to put that out there, as something that, we have to consider and we have to face that. And so Bob, one of the other things that I talk a lot about is that, we wanted to have this conversation on the connection between, housing security and food security. And again, for those of you who are interested, I really encourage you to listen in on the conversation that we had with Emily Broadley, where she defines, what it means to be food insecure, what the actual definition is. And sometimes we think, and Dr. Lautz was talking about this around, getting people into the homes that they deserve. And sometimes when we are there, how we have to move things around so that we can stay in our homes. And that sometimes that means we don't have enough food to eat, or we're not getting the medications that we need, or we're just not thriving, in the life that we want. I myself know what that is like, I made all the decisions that I could to put my money towards, paying my rent. And that meant making other decisions. Other bills were late. So Bob, I wondered if you could talk to us a bit more about, you talk so much around your personal beliefs around, food. And I wondered if, for everyone listening in, if you could talk a bit more about, NAR's commitment for when you have events that, that your amazing members go to these events and there's food. FRN has a program called Food Recovery Verified. And I just wondered if you could just talk to us about, why recovering food and ensuring that it goes to our local neighbors in need, why that's so important to you, and what you've been able to do as CEO of NAR to ensure that the events that you have, whenever there is food, that food goes to the people locally who might need that meal.
Sure, and yes, it's one of those things, for years, and being a very large association, which, certainly pre-pandemic and now starting to return a bit more in person again, we would host events with tens of thousands of people, with our members and guests that would attend these real estate conferences. And no different than many, many large events, you find that, you're feeding large numbers of groups. And then because of many times local regulation or laws, the food that's been served that has not been eaten, that's still out there and very viable, had to be thrown out. And it's crushing to watch it. And for years, I would look at it and say, wow, that's a shame. I would talk to food and beverage managers as well as my team. And the answer was, no, we cannot do anything and repurpose it. More importantly, I would say, well, I trust you're even giving it to your own staff. And the answer was, no, we can't. We have to throw it out. And we're talking about literally thousands of meals that's there. And all of us have been to situations where we've been to some banquet and, it's a buffet and you go up and you spoon your food in. And so for years, I was searching personally because I was involved with it within our organization and found the Food Recovery Network, or it sort of found me. My family, my daughter works and was a student at the University of Maryland, which is really where I think it was originally founded years ago by students to say, we cannot throw out all this food. There are people that are hungry in this country. And so I was at an event at the University of Maryland, saw these folks coming out and getting the food and packaging it up. And I'm like, what is this group? And learned of the Food Recovery Network. And what was an exciting opportunity and prospect for us was that, in fact, here's a leading organization that cares about the same issue that I was finding as a leader of an organization, that there are methods and processes you can put in place. Instead of serving all the food and making it exposed to everybody, the chef learns with their staff to put out lesser amounts at any one time, so that when it is depleted in a buffet line, they replenish it with smaller amounts, and the food that is not served in many cases can be packaged up if it's not used and then repurposed and provide to families. So we signed on to be a major sponsor and partner with the Food Recovery Network to have a verified program where we can sit there and make sure that the food that is not served and eaten, because we always, you always purchase as a provider more than enough food because you don't want your attendees to go hungry, but you have excess food. And so we found a way, I think in the last, since 2019, 1,600 pounds of food, nearly 1,400 meals were being able to be provided. But what I felt was more important is that being the largest association, we have 1,200 local associations and state associations. So this is not just an NAR at a major national level. How do we get our associations at the local city levels, county levels, and state levels also do the same thing? So we offered this program in partnership with the Food Recovery Network. We have hundreds of associations around the country that when they have their own local events, that they can sit there and do the same thing. So collectively, thousands of meals have opportunity to be provided in their local communities. And they gladly are participating because of the fact they too didn't know what to do. And it doesn't have to be an event for thousands of people. It could be a luncheon with 10 people. And if there's excess, no food should be thrown out and discarded when there are people in this country that are hungry. And I felt that there was no greater obligation that we have as an organization that serves every zip code in this country in the housing sector, that we can give back to families that make up those communities. And we got off to a great start in 19, then the pandemic hit and everything stopped in that area. But then we were encouraging our own association and our members and our associations on the local level. Well, you can still contribute even if there's not food being contributed. Well, then guess what? Several people stepped up, as did the associations, to say then we can provide sponsorship and cash dollars to go to other programs. So this is not just dependent on excess food. The verified program is very important, but there's a lot of ways that our members and folks in any community can get involved with this effort, because I think we have a moral and ethical obligation that do what we can in the communities that we serve. And our members, as I mentioned before, about 67% of our members get involved in local participation and volunteerism in their local communities. This is a great program to do it because it matters so much.
Oh, Bob, thank you. This, you just said so many amazing things. And I wanted to really stress why the partnership with FRN and NER is so powerful. FRN is also a volunteer-driven organization. When Bob gave the history of how he got involved, absolutely. We were started by college students at the University of Maryland who felt that moral obligation to ensure people had the food that they deserved. And we know that, your NAR members, just like FRN, our stakeholders, our volunteers, our alums, our students all across the country, share in that understanding. Food is a right. Housing, we all deserve safe housing. And when those are our marching orders, everything could fall into place from there. And leading up to this conversation today, I had we put out again the amazing report. We'll make sure that everyone has access to that. But we were also talking about how if the largest association in the world, and Bob just broke it down, the largest association in the world is broken down into regionally, state, city, community, neighborhood, every single zip code. If they can do it, if they can put in the practices to ensure that any surplus food that you have is going to people who need it, we all can do that. And where FRN steps in is, if that feels like an overwhelming thing to hear, we don't want you to be overwhelmed. We are solutions oriented. Give us a call, shoot us an email, and we will help you figure out ways to ensure that your surplus food is being donated. And we've done this for so many NAR events. NAR events, they don't even need to call us sometimes because they know how to do it. We want to just share that knowledge, but we also want to celebrate in this effort. It is a human effort. We are not an app. We are humans who want to help other humans. We're volunteering our time to do this work. So Bob, thank you so much for giving that perspective, that history, and really underscoring the moment that we are in. One other thing before I turn it back over to you both to give your final thoughts, things that you might want to share with everyone listening in, is, there are 42 million people who are food insecure right now. And that 42 million people, and as Dr. Lautz was saying, many of those folks are children. And we want folks to hear that, it is a big number, it feels scary, it feels wrong. And we want people to know that with a small decision that you can make today, we can make sure that that number goes down and that number goes down permanently. And, I'm thinking about Dr. Lautz has done some other research around, college, going to college, how much that costs to go to college, and how, financially that impacts folks. So again, when we're thinking about paying back our student loans, paying our rent or our mortgage, getting our medication, having transportation to go to anywhere, our jobs, going to the grocery store, that college tuition and paying back that college tuition is another factor. So I want to just put that out for everyone to know that there's so much research that NAR has done, and we can begin to see how these different structures affect all of us, even down to the communities that we live in. So I wanted to thank you both, and maybe we'll go with Dr. Lautz if there's maybe an action step, final thoughts that you'd like to share with us, and then Bob, I'd love to hear from you as well.
I just want to express my appreciation both for the research team for really helping put together this research, but also to our members, because we're looking at their activity truly on a yearly basis through we have an annual report called CARE. It's Community Aid and Real Estate. And what we found last year is that they took action, and really immediately when the pandemic started, they started volunteering, and the top places they volunteered and they donated their time. We're really making sure that people in their community had enough to eat. and they volunteered at food banks. They volunteered bringing food to frontline workers or donating their time doing that. And then also to elderly people who couldn't leave their homes as well, and making sure they had enough groceries. So shout out to our members, the realtors, who are really making their communities work by doing that. So thank you.
Yeah, and I would add simply, Regina, thanks to you and your team who do a just phenomenal job. It is not a types of work that's always in the limelight, in the spotlight. It's a lot of behind the scenes work. I know personally because I felt compelled enough to be a part of the board of directors for the Food Recovery Network. A great group of volunteers that get involved to really make a difference in this world. And while it sounds maybe very altruistic, it has a base purpose of base humanity, which is how do a country as plentiful as we are has hungry people, hungry families. I've mentioned my wife and I are very active at the University of Maryland, and you hear stories of people that are students living in their cars because they can't afford the housing of the university, and let alone have nothing to eat. And thank goodness there's these college programs that Food Recovery Network is involved with so many campuses to help feed the students and the communities. The point is we can all do our part. It doesn't have to take a lot of work. We're all busy. We all get that. But just simply being able to address something like this, we've had our employees are active with the Food Recovery Network. We have about 300 plus employees at NAR, and every one of them are committed. And I say that because when we have events, they're the first ones to want to make sure that the Food Recovery Network verified cards are up at every food event that we have. And they simply get involved. I had an employee come to talk to me that they talked their church minister into doing the same thing with the Food Recovery Network, because there's always opportunity here. So I just want to thank everybody and those of the folks that are participating and listening to this. We can all make a difference. I know we hear that all the time, but to do something with what Food Recovery Network's doing, and understanding for all of us that are involved in real estate and housing, that the intersection, the fact that people that maybe own properties and take a stake in their communities are maybe lesser dependent, not to say they're not dependent, but lesser dependent. But we have to all do our part of this and help pull people together and pull them through this. So I'm just happy to do whatever little I can and hope it makes a difference, and hope everybody can make their own personal difference in this fight.
Thank you both so much. I really feel so inspired, and I hope for everyone listening in, you can feel the love between all of us. We want you all to take that, sentiment that we literally can do this together. We don't want you to feel overwhelmed. We want you to take that first step. Get in touch with us. Please read this report. There's so much other amazing research that NAR has put out, thanks to Dr. Lautz, that we can begin to think about how we can improve the lives for everyone. And it starts with a meal. When we have a full tummy, we can tackle, some of the other issues, including some of the wonderful things that we do in our lives, like keeping up with our kids, playing soccer, and, but we all deserve that food. We all deserve the energy that food provides to us. And again, I start our conversations off with the land recognition because it is the land that provides all this amazing food for us. And so we have to cherish, this land that we all sit on, that we all inhabit, so that we can continue to do the things that we love so much. And again, conversations like this, thank you both for your time. I know you're so busy. To just be able to spend some time with me to talk about why this is important and really truly what we can do together. Thank you. And for everyone listening in, we are going to have so many resources for you. Please be involved. Get in touch if you have questions, including, things that this might have evoked for you. if you want to learn more, we can definitely put you in the right avenues to find more information. If you want to be involved, if you want to start a chapter, if you want to ensure that your next event, you know, now we're doing more things in real time and in person, that your event is doing the right thing with any surplus food that you might have. We can help with all that and everything in between. But thank you so much, Bob. Thank you, Dr. Lautz. Thank you, NAR, and all your membership, as you said. Thank you to all of our students, our alums all across the country doing the right thing. There's food recovery happening right now somewhere in the country. So thank you all for your time, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.